was listening to a sports talk show this morning on YouTube, and three guys on there, professional commentators. In fact, I think one was an NHL player in his day, and all very well versed in sports, and certainly in analyzing play and in all sports, not just because they're out of Toronto. It isn't just Toronto teams, but they did happen to be talking about the Leafs and some of the football games that were on the weekend. And yeah, they're entertaining. It's interesting. They bring on guests that have good insights, and I enjoy listening. But, you know, I have to tell you, my eyes kind of rolled because they delved into some old school, kind of archaic terms and way of thinking this morning. They were talking about what they called the three pillars of excellence within athletes, and the pieces that are essential for an athlete to be successful in his or her career. And, you know, for the most part, I don't disagree. They said, number one, need to be a skill player, right? Need to have skill. Number two, need to have a work ethic. And number three, they need to be crazy competitive. That was their term, not mine. And they went on to qualify the term crazy competitive and what essentially that meant, and basically where you got your fuel from, right? Because what I find interesting about all three of those is that there are three areas, three pillars, if you will, that an athlete or a coach has an impact on, right? So our skill level, I mean, granted, nature, nurture, for sure. Some athletes are more gifted, if you will, than others, but at the end of the day, you got to hone your craft, right? You got to work your craft. Number two, work ethic. Again, it's just learning how to flex your discipline muscle. It's becoming a professional athlete. It's realizing what the pros do, is what you sometimes hear. And number three, becoming crazy competitive. You know, that's something that we have a say in as well, right? So all three of those pillars can be controlled or influenced by the athlete and by the coaches too. But where we kind of disagreed a bit was in the third one, because where they landed with the crazy competitive piece was when they talked about how you hold that. And their recommendation was that you needed to hate losing more than you loved winning. And, you know, at its base, I don't disagree with that. It's a really powerful form of motivation, right? Hating losing. And hey, guilty as charged. I did it all through my high school, all through university, national team, all of it. Got me to an Olympic final. It works. It's a powerful motivator. However, now that I know the difference and how that form of motivation actually impedes performance, I'm not in that camp anymore. I'm in the love to compete camp, and I will forever be in that camp. A couple of reasons. Research now shows us that that the hate that we have for losing it's grounded in ego, and what it comes from is the fear of losing, right? Because the fear of losing is devastating to the insecurity that we may feel in our ego, because our reputation is wrapped up in how well we do. When we are fearful of losing, there are two hormones that are released into our body: cortisol, adrenaline. Both of those hormones impede skeletal, muscular movement and performance, right? They actually interfere with our ability to perform. On the opposite side of that, the love for performing, right? When you connect with the joy of competition, you inspire the release of dopamine and endorphins. And so those two hormones have an opposite impact in that when we have those feel-good endorphins released into our body, hormones released into our body, it encourages a state of joy. And from that state of joy, we enter into a flow state more easily. Once we're in that flow state, it supports high performance. The other interesting part, and some of you are going to recognize this, I've talked about it before, is that if you look to the Latin root word of competition, which is competire, the Latin definition of that root word is to strive together, right? It supports a synergistic relationship between competitors, that they work together. It's the combined efforts of competitors that result in the highest level of performance, right? Whereas when you compete from a state of fear in a situation where you hate losing, you're in a combative place, right? You are in a sort of a zero-sum game. And so that threat system impedes performance. And so we want to encourage a joy state, right? Where we are able to compete at a higher level. So if you're a young athlete, if you're a coach and you're trying to motivate your athletes or support the way they fuel their skill development and their work ethic, my vote is always going to go for the compete with, right? Not the compete against. It's the love of competition, not just the love of winning, but the love of competition that inspires the highest levels of performance. And when we default to a hate losing, first of all, it's easy, but what happens is that the body the mind can get weary of that, right? We get tired of that fear and that anger. Whereas when we have a joy state, it never gets exhausted. It continually fuels itself. And so for me, it's the most sustainable fuel. And the one that I tried to encourage, when I was coaching rowing. So your mindset matters? Yeah, obviously. You've got a say in all three of those. You can control your skill development, your work ethic, and how you fuel both of those. So for me, it's about fueling it with a powerful, sustainable fuel, which is the love of competition, not just the love of winning. So yeah, something to consider. Super, super important. And hopefully, I get it. It's their shtick. It's why people tune in. They love the macho kind of trash talking guys in a locker room kind of garbage. But, man, that stuff's got to end at some point, right? Its time has come and gone, and we got to progress. We got to move the conversation beyond just that macho rhetoric. It is so tiresome. So anyhow, something to consider. And I would certainly encourage you consider that. Okay? Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. Be kind to yourself. And we'll see you again next week. Okay? Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.